they presented us with this letter. Essentially, it was the choir being like, you all should not be the ministers of music. I was just a young person excited about doing my work for the Lord. And it really hurt me. These were my family members. They were the people that gave me money for school trips. It was shocking. And my unpopular decision is that I chose not to resign when my choir at my home church petitioned to kick me out of my position as minister of music.
If you've ever been pushed out of a community you loved, one that felt like family even, this episode is for you. At 17 years old, Troy Anthony's church petitioned to have him removed from his position as the minister of music. His mother resigned, he did not. Troy grew up in a Black Seventh-day Adventist church in Louisville, Kentucky. It wasn't just his church home. It was where he worshiped, his identity, and where multiple generations of his family held leadership positions. This Pride Month, we're sharing the story of a Black queer man who refused to let an institution decide which parts of him were God-given. That decision would lead him to build an entirely new relationship with faith, sexuality, and art, ultimately setting the stage for his work today as founding creative director of Fire Ensemble in New York City. I'm your host, Jameelah Calhoun, and this is Unpopular Decisions, the show about choosing your own script even when it feels like disappointing everyone else. If you've been enjoying our content, please take a moment to leave us a review. It really helps us reach more people, and make sure you're following the show so you don't miss a single conversation. Let's get into it. Troy, I'm so excited that you're here.
Can't believe it.
We've talked about this for a few months, and I just love that my worlds of singing and being a part of choir and New York are colliding here on the couch. So thank you for being on. Would you mind telling our audience what unpopular decision you made?
Yes, my name is Troy Anthony, and my unpopular decision is that I chose not to resign when my choir at my home church petitioned to kick me out of my position as minister of music.
Well, I know for folks who grew up in the church, they're definitely sensing that there's a lot of tea behind.
Well,
Well,
well, exactly.
we may have a little bit of church on the couch here today. Okay.
I've been known where two or more are gathered.
Exactly. Again, a lot of what this show is all about is this idea of how do we learn how to speak up for ourselves, especially when it's a situation that involves your community. And clearly, your home church that you grew up in is the most core community that one could really think of. So I guess before everything unraveled, what role did the church play in your identity, in your life,
Yeah.
and spirituality?
I grew up in the church. I grew up in the Adventist church. I'm from Kentucky. Consider myself a member of like the Black church with the capital B. It was my whole life. I mean, we were there all the time. My grandfather had a position in the church. My mom was the minister of music for many of years, and I was her kind of associate. I also was the youth leader. I was a youth, being a youth leader. That the church was a large part of my core upbringing. We were at each other's houses on the weekends. I grew up with children in other families. We also made the joke that it's like every day of the week there was something to do at church. But that was my everything.
And especially the fact that for you, it was a generational legacy. As you mentioned, your mom, your grandfather were all a part of the church. What kind of version of success did they model for you, and that you, as you were growing up, thought you wanted to grow up to be?
I had this real picture of what a good Christian looked like, what a successful adult looked like. And everyone was Black. That was also incredible. Louisville's very segregated. So I grew up in the Black part of town, and I didn't always have examples like in my immediate community of what a successful like young person looked like too. And my community, my mom, the church, they were always steering me in this path of excellence, of you don't have to play basketball, but you can. this idea that I really do and be anything because I was a bright young boy and I had talent.
Well, that's special. And like you said, I don't think that's common for especially young Black children coming up in different parts of the country and the world. So I think it shines through in how you talk about it, how that was like really part of your core confidence.
Yes. People also talk about it, the Black Church Music Conservatory. Like the music at my church, the skills that I was gaining, I learned to play the piano from tinkering around on it and someone coming up showing me a few things. And the ear that I was able to pick up the core music knowledge that I have also kind of came from the church. We were doing music at a what I would consider a high level. Everybody could sing. I used to make the joke that you could go to the local grocery store and start singing, Richard Smallwood's Total Praise, and you would have a professional choir
That's my
within a
favorite
few
song, by
minutes.
the way. Like that song gives me chills to this day. And yeah,
But
that's
it's
where
like
you know
we
the
all
real
know it.
singers versus like
Exactly.
I tell people I can sing, but I can't sing, okay? Because I need them to temper their expectations. Okay.
What's funny, based on the level of talent I grew up around, I would also say that about myself. I hired people to sing the music that I write. They sing it so much better than me, but yeah, like I grew up around an insane amount of talent that I didn't really realize until I left.
For those who are less familiar, what denomination
Mm,
particularly were in tradition were you growing up within?
yeah.
And what were some of the particular kind of either traditions or beliefs that were core to that?
Yeah, I grew up Seven-Day Adventist, which is like a very popular religion. And the kind of big core tenets are you go to church on Saturday, that is like the true Sabbath. They're also like very much into like an end times message. So 7 day is the Sabbath, Advent is like the second coming of Jesus. And then there's a strong health message too, based on like Leviticus, and you're not supposed to eat shrimp or pork. Those are kind of some big things. And hopefully Adventists watching would agree that those are the main tenets. But they're also like very big into like the truth. They believe that they are like every religion, they are God's true church, that they understand the Bible in a way that other people are misinterpreting. And when Jesus comes back, we will rise and be in heaven with him. And also, I have learned from meeting other Adventists from around the world that the flavor of Adventism that I grew up in is very different. The culture in the Southeast part, like that Bible Belt, that flavor of church that's very much rooted in the descendants of enslaved Africans. Like there's a just a special seasoning on that version of church that was woven in with the Adventism. And again, I learned that like by and meeting other Adventists in my adulthood. I was like, oh, this is really special.
I guess to that point of identity, though, there are pieces, of course, about faith and religious, institutionalized religion in particular, that has particular ideas around what it means to be a good person. And so I guess thinking about your own journey and before maybe this particular moment with the church board, what parts of yourself did you already understand to be acceptable and kind of in line with faith versus what parts maybe felt dangerous growing up?
I'm a queer man, cis man, and I knew that I was gay probably like I knew really early that like I was attracted to other boys. And that was never an acceptable trait to have. And I knew that early on. For lack of a better word, there was like the anti-sissification of the
Mm.
black man. Black men do this and they don't do this. And boys, stop hanging around those women and stand up straight and don't walk like that. There was a lot of that rhetoric that was kind of thrown at me from an early age. I think people could see the queerness in me before I even saw it in myself. And I remember there was this choir leader at a kind of sister church who came up to me and was like, the gay men are going to try to get you. Like, don't let them get you. I'm 12. Like, I'm young. remember a sermon that a guest pastor preached. He was like, boys shouldn't be allowed to wear pink. And I was wearing a pink shirt under my suit that day. It's like those messages were coming at me. And at one point, I went to a performing arts school, these very liberal spaces, like education wise. So I was out at school and pretty much everywhere that was not church and at home. Like everybody knew I was living this kind of double life per se, probably not as well as I thought. But yeah, a lot of those messages about this core piece of who I am were not positive. And I spent a lot of time, never in like the conversion therapy way, but I spent a lot of time like wanting my queerness to like not be a part of who I am. I thought I wanted to be a pastor. People were like, you have such a gift. I had a sense that if I just worked hard enough, if I like prayed long enough, that I could get rid of this gayness. And that sense that I had to change something that I felt was kind of fundamental to my being in order to be in right relationship with the Lord and reach my fullest potential. Like that was a very real part of my upbringing. It was hard having some empathy for my young self, trying to navigate all of that by myself, not having anyone really to talk to about it. Yeah, I think I never fully accepted that there was something wrong with me, and that never felt completely right, especially when I was affirmed in other spaces. So the kind of facade had started to crack by the time I'd had this really big event happen where the church was like, we don't want you here anymore.
There's so many studies queer youth are brought up in the church and then questioning their reality or questioning the faith have huge impacts on mental health. Because I can imagine how important that was to.
Absolutely. I had really great friends. I'm thinking of one, like my childhood best friend, who we actually dated for a short amount of time before we were like, I think we're friends. They were always kind of like, your family's crazy. Like, that church is crazy. Like, just out here in like a way that I didn't think was possible. I had a lot of good friends that were like great examples of that, of what living freely as a young person looked like. And I, even in this moment, I think I'm realizing how grateful I was for those friends who just affirmed me. We weren't exactly sure how to navigate my specific situation, but we did the best we could. Lots
Yeah.
of sneaking around, lots of lying, not, but it saved me in some ways.
In some ways, I'm thinking about this moment when you did eventually decide to kind of directly defy church board. I guess one, if you wouldn't mind setting the scene a little bit for the audience, you had to make a decision, resign or not to resign. But I'm also just curious about like, had you ever defied the church directly prior to this?
Kind of a precursor to the decision about me resigning. I used to attend church board meetings, like as an official head of a department. We would have these board meetings where we would discuss honestly anything. But one time, one of my good friends, he gotten a girl pregnant and it was his child. And that was a big no-no, like to have a child out of wedlock. And I remember we were having a discussion about like essentially excommunication and how, and everyone was like, "Yeah, that's the normal thing, and, like, it'll only be 3 months." And I was, in my mind, like, "Doesn't he need our help the most?" Even his grandmother was kind of like, "No, like, we need to do this." And I was like, "No, absolutely not." And I was the only person that voted no on, like, the excommunication. I just knew that that was not going to be a good decision. And that did baffle me. I mean, I bounced back, I, like, went along with it, but that was the first time that I really questioned that maybe the church isn't right about everything. Leading up to my decision not to resign, the choir in my church was incredible. In the Adventist church, you, like, vote in officers, the head of what departments. In my church, it had gone back and toggle back and forth between my mom leading the choir and this other woman leading the choir, who was also wonderful. So fast forward, I was 17. The choir, I was leading mostly. My mom was kind of there as a figurehead, but I was mostly leading the choirs. There were a few incidents where I was like rehearsing And would feel a little disrespected from some of the older people, or, I'd be like, hey, like, we're rehearsing, and like they didn't like that. Just power struggles. Like, I think people did not enjoy that me, my mom, and my grandfather were on the church board. On a church board of like 10, like 3 people is like I guess, a big deal. I still to this day don't exactly know what it was that we were doing that bothered them so much.
Yeah.
Don't understand. But I do know that on Valentine's Day, like right before my 18th birthday, they presented us with this letter. It said they didn't want us to be in our positions anymore. Like, it was the choir being like, you all should not be the ministers of music. They did list a bunch of reasons, mostly about my mom, again, who was not leading. Like, I was leading. And then there were like a few points about me. Like, I was just a young person excited about doing my work for the Lord. And it really hurt me. These were my family members. These are the people that raised me. They were the people that gave me money for school trips. It was shocking. I couldn't believe it. And my mom made the decision to resign. She was like, we're just not doing this. And I was like, I'm not going to resign. She didn't like that. But I think she also realized it wasn't her decision. And my grandfather too was like, you don't want to be somewhere where you're not wanted. But for me, it was like, you people don't determine what my work in the world is. You don't determine how I show up. And I just wanted the choir sounded great. I was doing a good job. Okay. On every metric, the services were banging. So we went into a board meeting and I read my mom's letter. My grandfather was sitting right next to me. And they were like, well, what about you? And I was like, I'm not resigning, which led to this whole other process. It's like, well, we have to vote. I looked at these people in the face and they voted me out.
Wow.
It was something like 4-3, and it crushed me. It broke my heart. And I think what I realized later is that that was a moment where everything I believed to be true was not true. The people that I thought were closest to me, that had my back, my entire literal faith system was all shaken. The Lord is keeping me as long as I do X, Y, and Z. None of that was right. And I think that is the greatest gift I've ever received, to know that you could be wrong about anything at any time, that literally everything about what you think is the truth can be wrong. It has built this like beautiful, like inquisitive curiosity about everything, to try to find my own version of truth. Eventually that led to, well, if they were wrong about that, they also could be wrong about my sexuality. They also could be wrong about who God is. There's a bunch of things they could be wrong about. All this stuff they've told me about what it means to be a man, they could be wrong about that. So it just allowed me to find my own set of values. And I'm not one of those people that's like, I had to be crushed in this way in order to get to that point. And if it hadn't happened that way, I might still be in the church to this day, hiding who I am or trying to play this duality piece. I don't know who I would have been.
I definitely want to continue getting more into how those relationships shifted after this moment. Betrayal happening in your face. I'm like, you're watching their hands literally go up to vote you out. So I can just imagine that moment sitting with you for some time.
They were my elders at the time, and now they are, like, some of them are nearing the ends of their lives, or people have reached out to me at different points to apologize. I was not the same after that. I was a very buoyant spirit and I was fired up. I loved going to church, and I think they all saw just the lights dim. And then there are the people that I'm like, y'all didn't think twice. Y'all probably still think that you were right about that thing that you did that one time. And yeah, they weren't. And I've gotten into many an argument. I didn't go back to church for a while, but my family eventually did. Like, my grandfather and mom are still going to that church to this day. It declined rapidly after my departure. That choir did not sound the same. And until
Also,
they do right by me. No,
come
I'm
on
kidding.
now. Well, I was going to say, knowing, I mean, your incredible work, creative direction of Fire Ensemble, which is a community choir here in New York. I have literally seen how you bring out the best of people's talent. And It's an open choir, which means he is crafting and molding these voices into something beautiful. We all kind of grow up with this meritocratic idea. Work hard, and not just work hard, but make impacts, showcase the results. And that should be the shield. I can just imagine how that was also like a huge factor.
And I continue to learn how, yeah, it doesn't matter how excellent you are sometimes. I was a curious, energetic Black kid at a PWI. I studied music education and I had all of this experience leading choirs. They were like, we don't know what to do with you. You want too much. You're curious about too much. Something about the light that I was shining felt threatening to some people. And that is still something that I wrestle with. I want your light to shine too. There's like no part of me that wants to dim anyone else. And part of the reason I started the Fire Ensemble is because I was like, people walk around with all of these thoughts based on what some third grade teacher told them about their voice. But it's like, it's your instrument. Like, literally born with it. And if you want to use it, let's use it. Let's figure out how to make it shine that we all belong to each other. We need each other to survive. I am really grateful that I didn't stop pursuing music, that I learned that that was, a God given gift, but not a church given gift.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it was my talent to do with what I wanted to do.
This is, I know, going to touch so many people. Maybe before we get more into your college experience and then of course your emergence as an artist, would love to play a little game.
Okay.
So this is Would You Rather. But of course, as you mentioned, you have some guest singers join your choir every once in a while. So maybe a little singing Would You Rather. Would you rather have Patti LaBelle
Oh.
or Beyoncé?
Oh, my God. What now?
As your guest singer?
I'm going to say Patti LaBelle.
Okay.
Because I just know she's going to take it there. Beyonce also would take it there, but I would probably be... Beyonce's probably one of those people that I would actually be starstruck. Like, I wouldn't know how to act. Her Virgo tendencies, I would be like, are we doing it well enough for you? Patti, I just think would go with it. But I mean, she would just take us wherever she felt, kick her shoes off, roll around on the floor a little.
Well, you're also from Kentucky.
Yes.
I just feel like there's so many like Kentucky traditions and things like that. So I was like, are you a Kentucky bourbon guy or Kentucky barbecue?
I am a Kentucky bourbon person. I think at some point I realized that it's like I need to have some pride in like my state and like learn more about bourbon. And I did. Yeah, bourbon is delicious. And it also can take your party experience to another level.
Oh, absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Okay. Well, this isn't a would you rather, but I also just want to continue getting to know your art and for our audience to know your work. What's the favorite song that you've written and why?
My favorite song that I've written, one of the first songs that I wrote like by myself is a song called Celebrate You. And I wrote it, I had a concert right before the whole pandemic went down on my birthday, March 1st of 2020. And I had just gone through a big breakup that like I was in a relationship that was not good for me at all. And I was actually feeling quite low about myself. Like my confidence was not feeling great. And I often write songs that I need. And I think if I needed, maybe someone else would. And so I wrote the song called Celebrate You, which is all about celebrating yourself even if you don't feel like it. It's like trust in your inner light that you'll be all right. Joy in your darkest night. So that kind of gospel sensibility of like praising in the midst of your storm, I was able to write Celebrate You. And people loved it. I sing it probably at every concert. And the choir is like, are we going to do this again? I literally, I put it out in rehearsal on Monday. And it was the first song. And I could see people being like, trust in your, like, sure, we know this. Like, why are you teaching it? But it's one of my favorite songs. It just kind of encapsulates everything that I think I'm about in one 4-minute number.
Yeah. Well, it's one of my favorite pieces. And it's one of those that, one, you just can't help but feel this energy and happiness kind of flow through your own body. And we start with the gospel clap, and it turns to a really good time. So I love that that's your favorite as well. It comes through because it does feel like that moment was one not being celebrated, of not feeling seen. Is there any part of you that questioned whether or not the church's actions had to do directly with your queer identity?
It is a question I still ask myself because I think toward the end of my high school experience, I did get bolder, and I will never truly be able to say like why those people did what they did. Even in talking to people after, there was no sense of like it didn't make any sense. Like they've even said they were like, I don't know. I think they were caught up in like group think.
Right.
Yeah, but I definitely think it was a factor.
Yeah. Was there any part of you that ever considered just resigning too? Or was it just an immediate, I'm absolutely not going to resign?
Definitely considered it. And especially when my mom wanted to resign. I grew up with this idea that we don't want to rock the boat. But I have a spirit of what are you talking about? I think there was a part of me that wanted to do the quote unquote easy thing. There's another part of me that felt deeply wrong. Like I had not done anything wrong. I was doing a great job. And then you added the layer of like, I deeply believed and still believe I was doing what God called me to do. Like I was in service and I couldn't believe that people didn't want me to do that. I also thought people just had a problem with my mom, but I found out it also did have to do with me. Yeah, if it was a thought, it was a brief one because I was mad. I was grieving my community turning against me
Yeah.
in front of my face. That's crazy. There was a small thought that I could resign, but I don't think that was ever really an option for me. I
Yeah.
was like, yo, God's not going, I'm not going to get to heaven. He's going to be like, why did you quit, my son?
Right.
I was like, no, I'm going to fight to do the work I know I'm called to do.
Yeah.
What I didn't know is that the calling was so much bigger than that church in Louisville, Kentucky.
Like, I'm just curious, like, was there like a specific moment or a specific vote when you realized this was not going to go the way that you expected?
When they started discussing it in the meeting,
Mm-hmm.
and bringing out things like the Roberts rules, like how do we vote? I was like, oh, y'all are really about to, okay, well, he doesn't want to resign. Let's kick him out. Like that essentially was the conversation happening in front of my face as if I wasn't there. It was very surreal. It was also really rushed. It was like, let's get straight to the vote. There were people that stood up for me. I should say that. There were people that were like, this seems crazy, but even they just weren't, there weren't enough. You know, another thing that happened, my grandfather, I don't think he did vote. He has apologized to me, but I think something he realized and that he said to me more than once, he's like, you needed an advocate. You needed someone to just be on your side. And he's like, and I didn't do that. And he's like, you just needed someone to say, I believe in what you're doing and that this is wrong. And no one had said that. But he did say that years later. I appreciate it for that.
You mentioned, of course, so there was separating from your particular church home and not, but it also sounds like you went on a journey to kind of redefine your relationship with God.
Yes.
And religion more broadly. What were kind of some of the particular textures or areas of that exploration you went through?
I tried to go back to church to say, maybe it was just those people. And that didn't feel good. It was like I took the red pill. I couldn't unsee the flaws. I went to it was a Methodist college and they were called integrated studies classes. And one of them was called Christianity and the Human Tradition. It was taught by this incredible woman named Glenna Jackson, Dr. Glenna Jackson. We studied all of the major religions and their text, but as text literature, as like there was a rabbi who wrote a book called Why Bad Things Happen to Good People. He had lost his child in like some sort of tragic accident or to an illness and wrestled with God and why did this happen to me? and focused on the story of Job having everything taken away from him, but also that it was this bet that God and the devil made to say Job is going to be faithful no matter what I do to him. And being like, do you want to serve a God like that? I forget what the triangle of tenets are, but it's like you can only believe two of the three things. God is all knowing, God is all powerful, and God is merciful. And it's like, which one do you want to discard? Nobody wants to serve a God that like will punish you to prove a bet to his enemy, you know? Having that class was really helpful for me in like trying to understand the God that I could believe in, or if I believe in God at all. Just being able to question that. That class was just so helpful, and I still really appreciate it. In my senior year, I had a class taught by this white man named Dr. Zimmerman, who to this day is my favorite professor that I ever had. And he essentially taught a class called Native American Religions. First day, he was like, two things you need to know about this class. I will be using the chalkboard and these notes. And he's like, and also, this class should not be called Native American Religions. Like, what Native Americans are doing is not a religion. He reframed religion or spiritual practice as a way of life, as something that was practical to help you on your daily journey, and I just never thought of it that way. I thought of it as this like other layer of things. So that's when I started getting into things like meditation, like practical spiritual tools, or seeing my singing practice even like as a meditation. You know, I am grateful that I had those 4 years to develop some newer understanding of God, that I was putting limitations on who God could be. God is limitless. Yeah, not to turn this into a faith podcast. All of a sudden, people are like, Jameelah went in a weird direction.
Well, look, we welcome all the things that ultimately help people feel more in touch with their own truth. I think college, again, can be such an amazing place just to really come to an intellectual understanding. How did you go about finding community and connection at that stage?
I went to school for music education. There was like an arts themed dorm. And so all these like theater majors and artsy people were in one dorm together. And that created its own familial bond, if you will. I did something I never thought I would do. I ended up rushing a fraternity. Very little known fact about me. Yeah, am in a fraternity. Guess you're in it for life. And in that process, I also met some of the greatest young men who became a family for me in many ways. My kind of big brother in the fraternity, his name was Chris. A lot of people did not think I was going to make it. And Chris was the president of the fraternity at the time, but he was voted in some weird way that, like, essentially the outgoing class had created a block to vote him in, and nobody in the fraternity actually wanted him to lead. They gave me to him as a pledge because they like wanted his line to die, like as like a punishment. Little did they know I was the pledge of the century. I'm kidding. But Chris is an amazing, still to this day, is an amazing human. And I feel like universe bond like allowed us to like have that relationship. Big part of my college experience also was developing some confidence and saying everyone else is telling me I'm not doing the right thing or doesn't want me to do this thing. No, I'm supposed to be doing. I'm gonna do it anyway. And yeah, I think the muscles were starting to grow. Little did I know. I mean, I that is the number one skill that I've needed in my artistic career. It's just being really sure about what I want to make and how I want to make it and not backing down from that. And also realizing I could be wrong.
Yeah, what was the evolution of your queer identity at this point? You had always had other artistic community where you were always out and yourself. Did the two sides of yourself start to more integrate? How did that experience?
Absolutely. I think that feeling so accepted by my peers, feeling like there was nothing I could do that felt like wrong, like there wasn't like a version of myself that they needed in order for me to be accepted. I think that was really helpful. And just being really affirmed in my queerness. And that was helpful. And I could be many other things other than the queer person. Everybody was gay. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't a thing that was abnormal. Yeah. And the winter break right after my freshman year is when I came out to my mom. And that started a whole other trajectory of things. And so I was beginning to have some courage around just being my authentic self, figuring out who that was, and dedicating myself to being that person at all times.
What inspired you to come out to your mother in particular at that juncture? And how did those relationships shift?
I think there are a few factors. One of them was, have you ever seen that movie with Denzel Washington? He's like a pilot and he like drinks
Yeah,
2 vials of vodka,
vodka. Yeah, there's
and
the case.
the case that is brought up against him, but he essentially like saved everybody on the plane.
Right.
And he gets to that final trial, and all he has to do is like lie and say that he wasn't the person that drank the vodka, and then he would have gotten off and been hailed a hero. And the line that he says is something like, "I just didn't have any more lives left." My mom asked me in the driveway, in the car, and she had asked many times before if I was gay, and I was like, "No, that's crazy." But she asked me, and it was just like, I can't lie anymore. It's like, I have to just say yes. And I did, and it wasn't a premeditated, like, I'm gonna tell her today. Yeah, that was just that.
It makes me think too, like, well, I love that quote actually. And I cannot think of the name of that movie. There's not just the lies that you tell, but also the lies that you believe.
Yes.
And so much of, as you kind of, again, went through this transformational experience, what were some of the lies that you had to stop believing?
There was something inherently wrong with the way I was made. The lie that I can please everybody, or that my existence, the purpose of my existence is to make sure everybody else feels great. Like that's just a lie. I'm sure there are many more along that vein. The lie that my silence will protect me. I love Audre Lorde's speech that became an essay, The Transformation of Silence into Language and Action, which I didn't read until like much later in my life. I was like 27 when I read that. But essentially, she just says, your silences will not save you. Like, if you look back at the end of your life and you realize everything that you held in and were silent about, you still gonna die. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's the final silence.
Right,
Death is the final
right.
silence. So I also think there was a lie I was carrying around that everybody had to believe what I believed in some way. Like that there was some moral code that we all needed to follow. And that's not true. Yeah, you just have to find your community that rocks with the values that you have.
That makes perfect sense how you had to really stop believing all of these things in order to make meaning for yourself. And now you've described yourself as someone who rigorously practices rather, Black queer joy.
Oh, yes.
And I love everything about that. I guess I'm just wondering what exactly those words mean to you.
I put those words in every bio that I send anywhere because not only is it about my identity, but it's also about a way of being and like a lineage of practicing joy. And I feel like Black folks and queer folks, and especially Black queer folks, in my own lineage have had to suppress or find ways to practice joy that felt secretive, or they had to find joy in ways by any means necessary. And I think for me, it is just a dedication to living in this body with these identities and just always trying to find where the joy lives. I wrote a song called Joy is Available, and not to be toxically positive, because the truth is that if you're experiencing joy, like you actually have to experience low moments to understand what a high moment is. And there can be more joy in getting through the hardship. And so for me, it's just that dedication to finding where the joy lives and continuously seeking that space and knowing that it's always available to me.
I also think a big aspect of starting to practice joy and courage in your own life is also acknowledging the people who maybe didn't have opportunity to fully express their joy and their courage in whatever space and time they were operating in. So it's actually a gift that we get to actually practice joy and joy being courageous in and of itself.
Yes. I received a spiritual reading from this shamanic woman who told me that in my lineage there were queer people, there were Black queer people who were not able to live fully in their truth, and that it is now my responsibility, because something else is available to me, to live in that truth and to and that explains why I'm not able to go with the status quo. And who knows if that is true, but it is helpful to think, right, I'm not just living for myself. I'm actually living for everyone that was not able to live in the way that I am able to live. Yeah, that really motivates me.
I love how many modalities and teachings that you really embrace during your exploration.
Is there one right path? I don't, if there is, I ain't never met it. Everything is a tool. Everything has something that can teach me a little more about myself. Even if it's the fact that I flat out reject it,
Right.
that's also teaching me. So, yeah, I think that that has been a really big learning for me, that truth does not exist in one place, in one package, in one person, in one religion. Truth is like evolving in each moment. And it's the pursuit of it actually that is the most rewarding.
Yes, so many aspects that you've shared with us today. I am curious about what parts of yourself or others did you feel like you had to forgive in order to move forward?
So many. I would say I'm still on that journey in many ways. I think there are so many little Black queer boys carrying around a lot of shame. And something I really had to continue to work with are the ways in which that shows up, and how I've allowed shame and fear to like keep me from experiencing love fully, or honoring honoring myself and knowing how I need and should be loved. And yeah, I've had to forgive myself for that. And in so many ways, I think I was just running from myself in some aspects, including the years when I ran away from my like gifts, like my singing and the choir stuff and gospel music. Like I had to forgive myself for thinking I wasn't worthy to be in those spaces, or like to feel like my talent was worth pursuing. And I've had to forgive myself for, yikes. I mean, I held on to a lot of anger for a long time that I don't think I hold. I don't think that it really exists in me. I don't think I'm angry.
What's been the path of forgiveness more so vis-a-vis the others who were part of this story?
I also punished like my mom and grandfather for like going back. Like I was like, how could you go back there? They've taught me so much about forgiveness, and I realized like the church plays a different role in their lives than it does mine. They continue to honor their call to service. My grandfather, I think he still shows up and cleans the church like once a week. He's still at 87 will help with the food pantry. And those are things that is his service. Like no one can keep him from doing his service. My mom still will come out of her pocket to do a program for young people in the community, or loves to start a choir, or like do something for young people or single moms. Like she just is always for community in that way. And she did not let those people stop her from doing that. I think there was a time when I was like, all of you will pay, none of you deserve my being, my presence in your life. And I think I had to come to a different place, which was that everyone, no one wakes up in the morning and says, I want to be me. Like I want to be the scum of the earth today. I want to upset someone else's reality. I want someone else to actually feel bad about themselves. I don't think people wake up with that intention. And there's a large part of my mind and heart that knows that those people that I once called family probably have regret, probably didn't mean for everything to happen that it did. Maybe don't even know that they made this sort of impact in my life. I can let that exist and I can let them be. And also deserve the fullness of life. Yeah, there was a long time when I was like, everyone will pay, and I just don't feel that way anymore. Yeah. Now I also don't need those people to like my mom is always like, "Don't you want to come to the church and sing a song?" I'm like, "No, I don't. I don't want to do that. Thank you so much. That time is done. We can sing in the house." I think there are ways in which I can forgive, and I will never forget. I think I'd be dishonoring myself if I forgot what happened there or how those people treated me. And there's a part of me that's like, I won't allow anyone to put me in my place in that way ever again.
Well, I'm sure in some ways that's also contributed to how you've thought about your artistic path and your path to music since then. To some extent, being an independent artist is also an unpopular decision in and of itself.
Absolutely.
Yeah, how has this experience informed your artistic journey and path?
In so many ways. And I started writing in 2016 at the same time that I took on this kind of big nonprofit job working with young people in the Bronx. And in the pandemic, well, right before the pandemic, in 2018, I received this commission from the Shed. And I knew I wanted to write a piece that was about spirituality, that had this gospel flavor. At the time, I was writing a piece called Auntie, which it's a whole new piece now. And in the pandemic, like when everything shut down, there was this sense that like, will theater ever happen again? But I kept writing. And in 2021, the Shed reached out and they're like, we're ready to do the piece. And I was like, I don't think I can do that piece anymore. And in 6 months, I wrote the show called The Revival. And that was such a reclaiming of all of the beautiful pieces of the Black church that I love and creating this service, essentially this concert service that was meant to help people find salvation through collective liberation. But all those things that I learned in the church, not only just like the music, like the technology inside of gospel music is powerful, but I really spent time with what does testimony mean in everyday life to people who aren't just Christians? What does it mean to like tell your story and to have it witnessed? What does it mean to say the way that you brought yourself out of darkness and how that can help someone else? What are the ways in which I experience surrender in my daily life? Surrender is such a large part of that lineage, that Black church lineage. How can I illustrate that in a song? Like, what do we need to surrender to? And in many ways, the church is one of the only places that people go to think about how to change themselves. Now, we also have like therapy but gospel music is meant to change people. So I was like, people need to change. How can I help them on their journey toward change? Realizing all of the brilliant spiritual technology inside of my churchy upbringing, finding the beauty in all of that has is actually what propelled my career. That piece was monumental in my life. It was the first time I was able to make something that really felt like mine, and it was a hit. And it brought these people together to sing in this I wrote and with a lyric sheet in the same spirit that I did on Friday night at church. And yeah, it has just fueled my artistic output. And I continue to explore it. And I'm so grateful now for all that experience that I had in the church growing up. I've been teaching some form of a pop-up choir since like 2013. Now everybody's got a choir. And I love that. I think it's wonderful. But I really have been exploring that model for a long time. And so having the Fire Ensemble too, like be a place where I can bring the spirit of those Friday night church rehearsals into a secular environment, we can also talk about our holiness, and we can also talk about how do we get through the week. I guess it's a I avoid this at all costs. I'm like, this is not a church. Not You don't have to believe anything, but that's not true. You do have to believe that people can change, and you do have to believe that that includes you, that this is a safe space for you to do your work, is what I call it, which is whatever you need to do to make you a better person for yourself and for the people around you. So, yeah, that it informs every part of my artistry.
As we start to wrap, I guess what would you want to say to the person listening, maybe who is, facing big questions about their community that they grew up in, maybe the faith that they were raised within, and feeling like maybe there are parts of it that are starting not to make as much sense?
Yeah, I think that to be so stereotypical, like the truth will set you free, quite literally. The thing about the truth is that it exists whether you acknowledge it or not. And as soon as I started to acknowledge the truth, as painful as it may have been, I was able to get to a more authentic place of living. And it was so much better than what I was putting myself in a box for. People are limiting their gifts because they want to please, or they feel unsafe being all of who they are. And I am so ready for church leaders to come out and be who they are and know that they deserve that freedom that everybody else gets to live with. And also, I reject wholeheartedly this that being gay is wrong or bad or something, a sin that everybody needs to tolerate. Like, I hate when
Mm,
people are like, well, we're all sinners. Stop. Full stop. Sure, we are. There are things about me that I don't love that I can work on, but my queerness is not one of those things. It's a gift. So I think that's the one thing I want people to understand is like you have to honor your gifts. And every moment that you spend not honoring your gift is not good news for you. Yeah. And I think that's also a big part of why I try to create spaces where people can see themselves in a new way or realize a new gift they didn't know they had, or just to celebrate the gifts that they do bring to the world. We don't get that enough from each other, and especially from ourselves. I'm constantly trying to rewire the parts of my brain that say I'm not good enough or the album is not good enough. There are all kinds of ways in which my own mind is what I'm fighting. And yeah, maybe today even I can declare for myself, like, I don't want to fight that battle anymore. I am ready with everyone who's listening to this to step fully into my power and to honor everything that I've been given in this lifetime.
well, that's a sermon right there. Okay.
You told me to go to church.
Right, exactly. So full circle. Well, our last question here. What would you say to the haters? Okay. The people, the church aunties who, judge your queerness, who judge that you defied the church without understanding the reality behind it.
Aren't you tired? Spend energy on something else because as much as people want to hate on me, it's all motivation. Maybe one of my tragic flaws is you tell me I can't do something, maybe I'm going to do it well and make you eat that. But yeah, like, aren't you tired? Like, there's just so. And actually, what I want to say to those haters is, what are you denying in yourself? What is it about my light that makes you see something you don't have? What, like, explore yourself a little more to understand why the hate comes up. Because there's something there. It's actually not a problem with me. You're the problem, babes. Directly to camera. But truly, I want all people to be free, and you cannot be free hating on me. That's a lyric. Do not be free hating on me.
There's a new song that is coming out, so it'll be on the album. I know this conversation and what you shared will heal someone out there to be able to live rigorously in their Black queer joy.
I hope so. I hope that this conversation is some stone on the path of someone's journey to healing. I'm still healing, and I'm grateful for this platform that you are uplifting people in their unpopular decisions. It's such a brilliant like premise, and it's why I was so excited to talk to you. So thank you so much for this wonderful space to share and for someone to benefit from what I've been through.
Well, thank you again. Where can people find you, your work, the coming album?
Yes.
Yeah.
I encourage everyone to go to the Fire Ensemble's website, just fireensemble.com. We keep it up to date with all of our upcoming concerts. You can join the choir. You can come to our Monday night choir rehearsals if you're in New York. I'm also known to get on a plane and go minister, if you will, to other cities. So watch out for that. You can also follow me on Instagram at Troy Anthony Music, or you can follow the Fire Ensemble at Fire Ensemble.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Car, and to the production team.
If you're in the New York area, please join Troy and the Fire Ensemble at a participatory concert experience called All Things New. This experience will be on Tuesday, June 16th at 7:30 p.m. at the Judson Memorial Church. There's a link to buy tickets in the show notes. There were moments in this conversation that moved me so much, and I'm sure there are elements that have stayed with you too. Don't rush past it. That's usually the beginning of a bold decision to grow and become the person you were always meant to be. Don't forget to subscribe to Unpopular Decisions wherever you get your podcasts for more real conversations about what it takes to stop following the script. Please go ahead and share this with a friend as well. Thank you for listening, and I hope to see you on June 16th.